Everyone loves following the adventures of Peppa Pig, don't they? This adorable and fun-filled cartoon has captured the hearts of children and adults alike over the years. But what most people don't know, probably including you, is that behind this animated and colorful universe lies a dark and mysterious story about none other than the protagonist's little brother, George. Many theories circulate about him. For example, some suggest George might be adopted, meaning he could actually be the son of Aunt Dottie and not Mummy and Daddy Pig. Others believe the little piglet was born into a troubled home with problematic parents who gave him up for adoption when he was just a newborn piglet. However, the truth is that George's origins go far beyond any of these simple theories. Today, we're going to delve into the scariest theory about this little pig's past. So get ready, turn off the lights, and make sure your feet are tucked safely under the blanket. And as always, put on your golden boots and join us as we dive once more into the incredible world of Peppa. The Change. Peppa and her family's cartoon is entirely inspired by the everyday lives of people living in England since the show originated there. That's why many of the series' characters are based on real people, something most of us don't even realize. This is especially true for characters like Peppa and Madame Gazelle, as we've discussed or will discuss in videos here on our channel. The same applies to little George. In fact, it's believed that the idea of giving Peppa a younger brother came from a real-life story filled with pain and suffering about a young English boy who lived, and unfortunately died, many years ago in a rural area of the country. But the real George didn't always live in the countryside. In the true story, the young boy was the son of a middle-class couple who lived in London. Their lives were relatively comfortable, and they were the picture of an almost perfect family. No major problems, good health, and a deep affection among the parents and their son. However, George's life started to change completely when he was just 3 years old. That's when his father, who worked as a supervisor in a food factory, saw the company go bankrupt, leaving all employees jobless overnight. This was enough to destabilize George's parents mentally and financially, leaving their future uncertain, especially knowing they needed money to cover their son's tuition at a good private school. Even at such a young age, George began to notice that things at home were no longer the same. His parents, who used to be so loving toward each other, started arguing constantly. Endless fights, loud yelling echoing through the house. Even George, so innocent, began to understand that the root of their conflicts was the lack of money. For months, he watched his father sleep on the couch almost every night to avoid further clashes with his mother, until one day, his parents sat him down for a serious talk. "Son, we're moving. It's something we need to do. You're too young to understand, but it'll be better for all of us," his father said with a sad smile. George's mother tried to cheer him up. "You're going to love the new place. It's a farm with lots of animals, and there are piglets. You love piglets, don't you?" Still, George couldn't hide his sadness. He cried softly as he hugged his favorite toys, a farmer and Mr. Oink. That night, he imagined what their new home would be like, trying to convince himself that at least he might make new friends among the animals. Happy life. As we mentioned earlier, life wasn't always tough for George. Before the drastic changes in his life, he was a very happy child. 2 years old, George lived in a peaceful neighborhood in a cozy house in the United Kingdom. With loving and financially stable parents, he had everything a child could wish for. His toys were his greatest treasures, especially his farm playset, which included animal and human figurines. His favorite? Of course, the plastic pig named Mr. Oink. George was the joy of the neighborhood. He loved playing in the garden, and often other kids from the street would join him to run around and make up stories together. His parents were always proud to provide such a happy childhood for their only son. George's constant smile was proof that at that time, his life was everything any child could dream of. Are you enjoying uncovering these hidden secrets about George's story? If you're loving the video so far, comment "fear" below and give us a like, so we know you want more stories like this. Life on the farm. George's life changed completely when the family moved to a farm his father had unexpectedly inherited from a great uncle who had passed away without children. The farm was located in the countryside, and although it lacked many amenities, it was a large piece of land with a few ongoing livestock operations, primarily pig farming. This was seen as an opportunity for a fresh start, so the entire family moved to the property. George's father, who had worked in the food industry, saw pig farming as a chance to earn money by producing pork-based products like sausages and salami. The boy was struck by their new home, but not in a good way. The house was old with an air of abandonment. Instead of a backyard to play in, there was only a pasture where a few cows grazed. Inside the house, things weren't any better. The floors creaked, the furniture seemed like it was from another century, and everything was in need of repair. George felt a chill as he took in the place that was now his home. His parents tried to reassure him, placing their hands on his small shoulders and saying, "You'll get used to it soon, sweetheart." But for little George, adapting was harder than they anticipated. His days were lonely, as the family lived in a very isolated rural area. He frequently asked why they had to live there. His parents explained it was a temporary solution, the only way they could save money and rebuild their lives. His father often mentioned how the company he worked for had gone bankrupt, leaving him without the severance pay he was owed. But to a child, it all felt like an unsolvable puzzle. With no neighbors or schoolmates nearby, George found companionship in the farm animals, the only friends he could have. At first, he found the real animals strange, noticing how different they were from the plastic miniatures he loved so much. But over time, he began to find the pigs' grunts amusing and even started imitating their sounds. He grew so fond of the piglets that he often walked on all fours, snorting like they did. As the years passed, the farm became George's entire world. By the time he turned 5, he was almost an expert in some tasks. He would wake up before dawn to help his parents milk the cows. The strong smells and the mud that had once made him wrinkle his nose had become part of his daily life. He helped his parents sort products to sell in town and stayed on the farm while they were away. George spent hours with his muddy friends, especially the piglets. Whenever his parents took too long in town selling vegetables, meat, or milk, George would run to play with the animals. This closeness to the farm animals only deepened his distance from other people. One of George's most distinctive traits was his blue overalls. He loved wearing them, whether he was playing with the animals or helping with chores. To George, those overalls felt like an extension of himself, something that made him feel comfortable and secure. If you're curious to find out how this story ends, click the subscribe button now, activate the bell icon, and make sure you don't miss the next part of this incredible tale. New problems. Even though George's parents were living on the farm out of necessity, they never hid their desire to rebuild the life they had before, back in the London suburbs. They spoke enthusiastically about a business they were investing in, convinced it would be the key to recovering everything they had lost. Many times, they asked George if he was excited to return to their old home, but the boy would simply reply, "I don't care," adding that here on the farm, he had real friends. This response worried his parents. They saw how much time George spent with the animals, especially the pigs, and tried to convince him that, as friendly as the creatures might seem, they were not like humans. "They don't think or feel like we do," they would say. But George disagreed. He was certain the pigs understood him and that their friendship was real. Then everything changed for good. One morning, George was woken by shouting coming from the kitchen. He ran to see what was happening and found his parents completely distraught. He asked what was wrong, and between screams and tears, they explained they had been scammed, lost all their money, and were now trapped in this life forever. George tried to comfort them, saying the farm wasn't so bad, but his parents were beside themselves. They argued furiously, declaring they were going to separate because they could no longer stand the situation or each other's company. Terrified, George ran out of the house. Rain was pouring down, lightning lit up the sky, and thunder shook the air. Despite the horrible weather, George preferred facing the storm over hearing another fight. Soaking wet and shivering, he found refuge in the barn, where he hid with his pig friends. With tears in his eyes, George poured out his feelings to the animals, talking about his parents and everything that had happened. He felt like the pigs understood him, and it brought him comfort. However, the storm worsened, scaring the animals, who began pacing nervously. Meanwhile, George's parents, realizing their son was missing, went out to search for him, calling his name in the downpour. George heard their voices and shouted back that he was fine, but he wasn't sure they could hear him over the deafening sound of the wind and rain. The pigs grew even more agitated. With a deafening thunderclap, the wooden door that kept them in gave way. George tried to get up and leave, but he tripped and fell. Before he could react, the frightened pig stampeded toward the exit, trampling over him. Outside, his parents saw the commotion and, among the pigs, spotted the blue strap of George's overalls. Panicked, they ran to him, but it was too late. George was lying in the mud, cold and lifeless. The tragedy shattered the family. Unable to cope with the loss, the parents separated, and the story of the boy who died after being trampled by pigs spread across the United Kingdom. The Legend of George. For many years, George's story was merely a local legend, passed down from generation to generation. That is, until it reached the ears of two men who were allegedly Neville Astley and Mark Baker, the creators of Peppa Pig. Inspired by the tale, they decided to honor the boy in their children's series. They named the youngest pig in the family George and gave him the same age the boy had during his happiest years. As a special tribute, the character also made snorting sounds, just as George used to do when imitating his pig friends on the farm. The Peppa Pig series became a worldwide phenomenon. Today, George isn't remembered for his tragic end, but for the innocence and contagious joy that marked his childhood. And what about you? Had you heard this story before? It's quite different from what we see in the show, isn't it? We've picked 2 amazing videos for you to keep enjoying with us. Just click on the one that interests you the most. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video!